The 2026 Formula One season just started in Australia, and within minutes something happened that nobody in the paddock expected. George Russell set the fastest lap of qualifying. Mercedes locked the entire front row, and it looked like the Silver Arrows had just taken control of the new era. But seconds before that lap appeared on the screen, Max Verstappen revealed something that immediately caught the attention of the FIA. He hit the brakes into turn 1, and the Red Bull snapped. A violent spin. A car in the wall. The reigning world champion eliminated before setting a single lap. But here is the part that makes this moment so important. When engineers looked at the telemetry behind that crash, they noticed something unusual in the hybrid braking system. Something that may have triggered questions from the FIA. And the most shocking detail is this. The exact same Red Bull car ended up third on the grid with a rookie driver. Which means the real story behind Russell's fastest lap is not just Mercedes' speed. It is what Verstappen accidentally exposed about the RB22. And if the FIA investigation confirms what some engineers already suspect, this could become the first major technical controversy of the 2026 season. The Australian Grand Prix always carries a special kind of pressure. It is the first race of the year. The first moment when months of development finally meet reality. All winter long, teams work in complete secrecy. Engineers spend thousands of hours in wind tunnels. Design departments build entirely new aerodynamic concepts. Drivers train for months without knowing if their car will be the fastest or one of the slowest on the grid. Then the season arrives in Melbourne. And suddenly, everything becomes clear. But the 2026 season started with even more uncertainty than usual. Because these new regulations have changed the entire philosophy of Formula One cars. More electrical power. A much larger role for the hybrid system. And most importantly, a braking system that is far more complex than anything drivers have experienced before. In previous generations, braking was simple. The driver pressed the pedal. The carbon brakes slowed the car. Balance was controlled mainly by brake bias. But the new generation of Formula One cars works very differently. When a driver presses the brake pedal now, two systems begin working together at the same time. The mechanical brakes slow the car. But the electric motor on the rear axle also begins harvesting energy. That energy is recovered and sent back into the battery. The system is incredibly efficient. But it also changes the balance of the car under braking. Because harvesting energy creates resistance on the rear wheels. And if that resistance becomes too strong at the wrong moment, the rear tires can suddenly lose grip. That is exactly the scenario engineers feared before the season began. A situation where the balance between mechanical braking and energy recovery becomes unstable. And the reason this matters so much is simple. At 280 km per hour, even a tiny imbalance can cause a huge reaction. A small lock on the rear axle. A sudden loss of grip. And within seconds, the driver is no longer in control. Which is why several teams arrived in Australia extremely cautious about their braking configurations. During the practice sessions on Friday, many drivers mentioned something interesting. The cars felt sensitive under braking. Not always unstable, but unpredictable in certain conditions. Especially when entering corners after long straights. Max Verstappen himself hinted at this earlier in the weekend. He described the sessions as not completely clean. Grip levels changed. Balance was still evolving. At the time, those comments sounded normal for the first race weekend of a new regulation era. Every team expects a learning process. But what happened during qualifying suddenly gave those comments a completely different meaning. Because in the very first serious braking zone of the session, something inside the RB22 reacted in a way nobody expected. Verstappen accelerated down the main straight in Melbourne. The RB22 was gaining speed quickly. Energy deployment fully active. The car approaching the first corner at nearly 300 km per hour. From the outside, everything looked completely normal. Just another qualifying lap beginning. But inside the cockpit, Verstappen knew this lap mattered. He had not yet set a time. And in modern Formula One qualifying, that creates enormous pressure. Drivers push immediately. No room for hesitation. No room for mistakes. As Verstappen approached the braking zone of turn 1, he did what he has done better than almost anyone over the past decade. He attacked the brakes. Late. Aggressive. Right at the limit. For years, that braking technique became one of his biggest advantages. He could brake deeper into corners than most drivers, carry more speed, rotate the car perfectly, and still keep everything under control. But this time, something completely different happened. The moment Verstappen touched the brake pedal, the rear of the car reacted instantly. Not gradually. Instantly. The rear axle locked. The RB22 snapped sideways. The car rotated violently across the track. A full spin in the middle of the braking zone. Gravel exploded under the tires. And seconds later, the Red Bull slammed into the barrier. The entire moment lasted only a few seconds. But those few seconds completely changed Red Bull's qualifying session. Because Verstappen had not even completed a lap. Which means the reigning world champion was immediately eliminated from the session. No recovery. No second attempt. Just silence on the timing screen where his name should have appeared. Inside the cockpit, Verstappen immediately reported something important over the radio. The rear locked. Those words were short, but incredibly revealing. Because drivers can feel the difference between pushing too hard and something mechanical happening behind them. And Verstappen's reaction suggested the car surprised him. Not the other way around. Engineers inside the Red Bull garage immediately began analyzing the telemetry. Brake pressure, rear axle torque, energy harvesting levels. Every parameter connected to the braking phase. Because under the new 2026 regulations, braking is no longer controlled by a single system. It is a complex interaction between the driver and the hybrid power unit. When the driver presses the brake pedal, the rear electric motor begins recovering energy. That recovery process adds resistance to the rear axle. And if the harvesting system becomes too aggressive at the wrong moment, the rear wheels can suddenly receive more braking force than expected. When that happens, the tires lose grip. The rear of the car rotates. And even a driver like Verstappen has almost no time to react. Several analysts inside the paddock noticed something unusual about the spin. It happened too quickly. Too violently. Almost as if the rear brakes applied far more force than the driver anticipated. Which is why the moment immediately attracted attention from technical observers. Because if the interaction between the mechanical brakes and the hybrid harvesting system caused the instability, it could represent a much deeper issue. Not only for Red Bull, but potentially for other teams using similar braking strategies. However, while the cameras focused on Verstappen's crashed car at turn 1, something else was quietly happening on the timing screens. Something that almost nobody noticed at first. The other Red Bull was still on track. And the story of the RB22 was about to become much more complicated. While Verstappen's Red Bull was being recovered from the gravel at turn 1, most of the attention from the broadcast stayed on the crash. The cameras replayed the spin. Commentators tried to understand what had happened. And inside the Red Bull garage, engineers were already studying the data. But at the same time, something much quieter was happening on track. The second Red Bull was still running. Isaac Hadjar. The rookie. His first full season with the team. And suddenly, without the spotlight on him, Hadjar found himself carrying the entire Red Bull weekend. At that moment, the situation inside the garage had completely changed. One car was out of qualifying. Destroyed in the barriers. The other car now had to represent the team alone. For a rookie driver, that kind of pressure can be overwhelming. But Hadjar approached the session in a very different way. He did not panic. He did not try to immediately chase the fastest time. Instead, he began building his laps carefully. Corner by corner. Lap by lap. And slowly, something interesting started to appear on the timing screens. The RB22 still had speed. Hadjar progressed through the session. First surviving the opening phase. Then moving comfortably into the next round. Each lap slightly cleaner. Each braking zone a little more controlled. Which immediately raised an important question inside the paddock. If the RB22 was capable of producing competitive lap times, why did Verstappen lose control so suddenly? The answer may lie in something engineers began discussing almost immediately after the crash. The operating window of the car. Several analysts believe the RB22 might be extremely fast when the setup and hybrid systems are perfectly balanced. But if the configuration moves even slightly outside that window, the car can become very difficult to control. Especially under braking. And Albert Park is one of the worst places for that kind of instability. The circuit may look smooth on television. But drivers know the truth. The braking zones are uneven. The surface changes grip constantly. And the first corner arrives after one of the fastest sections of the entire track. Which means the rear axle experiences enormous stress the moment the driver touches the brake pedal. If the balance between mechanical braking and energy recovery is even slightly off, the rear tires can lock instantly. That is exactly what appears to have happened to Verstappen. But Hadjar's approach to the session may have avoided that problem. Instead of attacking the braking zones aggressively, he built confidence slowly. Adjusting to the car. Understanding how the rear behaved. And by the time the final phase of qualifying arrived, something remarkable happened. The rookie Red Bull driver was still there. Now fighting against the strongest teams on the grid. Mercedes looked incredibly stable. Ferrari appeared competitive. McLaren was close behind. And then George Russell began the lap that would define the entire session. The Mercedes looked calm, precise. The car remained planted under braking. No sudden corrections. No instability. Russell attacked every corner with confidence. Sector 1 was fast. Sector 2 even faster. By the time he crossed the line, the message was clear. Pole position. Mercedes had locked the front row for the opening race of the 2026 season. A huge statement at the start of the new era. But right behind those two silver cars, another result appeared. Third place. Isaac Hadjar. The rookie had placed the RB22 on the second row of the grid. Ahead of Ferrari. Ahead of McLaren. And suddenly the narrative of the day became far more complicated. Because the same car that had thrown Verstappen into the wall minutes earlier was now sitting near the front of the grid. Which suggests something extremely important about the RB22. The car is not slow. In fact, the data shows it still has serious performance potential. The aerodynamic efficiency remains strong. Straight-line speed looks competitive. High-speed corners still appear to be one of its strengths. But the car might demand a level of precision that even the best drivers must learn again. And that is exactly why the moment Verstappen spun in the first corner has attracted so much attention. Because if the hybrid braking system played a role in that instability, the FIA will want to understand it completely. Not only to evaluate Red Bull's configuration, but to make sure the interaction between braking systems and energy recovery is behaving safely under the new regulations. And that investigation could reveal something even bigger. Whether the RB22 is simply difficult to control, or whether Verstappen accidentally exposed a challenge that every team in Formula One might soon face.